My name is Heather Nolan. I am 34. I am a certified public accountant. I am a mother of 2. 3 weeks ago, my own father, Franklin Mercer, told 2,400 people he was disowning me. He did not call first. He did not sit me down. He wrote a Facebook post at 11 o'clock at night. Then he went to sleep. By the time I woke up, my in-laws had seen it. Teachers at my children's school had seen it. People at our church had seen it. Our congregation is about 800 people. The post spread fast through the town. My phone did not stop ringing for days. Most calls were not concern. Most were questions. The post did not explain anything. It only said I brought shame to the Mercer name. It asked people not to contact me. That blank space did the real damage. Strangers love to fill blanks. People assumed affairs. People assumed addiction. People assumed theft. Anything dramatic enough to repeat. My 8-year-old came home crying. A classmate said her mother got kicked out. I held her and promised she was safe. My stomach dropped with every new notification. My father is not only a dad in our town, he is a man with influence. He runs the Mercer charity. He is an elder at church. He knows everyone worth knowing. When he speaks, people listen. When he points, people step away. I tried to tell myself it would blow over. Then my employer asked for a meeting. Then my neighbor stopped waving. I realized this was not gossip. It was exile with a smile. Here is what Franklin did not expect. While I was shaking and trying to keep my kids calm, my husband Ryan Nolan was working quietly. Every night after I went to bed, Ryan sat at our kitchen table. He searched public records like he was building a case. He found filings tied to my father's charity. He found consulting payments that made no sense. He found a company dissolved years ago. Yet it kept getting paid. He followed the trail with patience. He reached one number that would not leave us alone. $185,400. Missing on paper. Missing in real life. Ryan did not tell me right away. He waited until he could prove it cleanly. Then he said one sentence that turned my fear into fire. He said my father posted that message because he is hiding something. By Monday morning, the post had already done its job. The town treated me like a warning label. At school pickup, a mother I used to chat with turned her card away. My 8-year-old asked why friends stopped waving, and I said grown-ups can be cowardly. My younger child asked if Grandpa still loves us, and I could not answer. At work, my supervisor called me into a conference room, and his face looked uncomfortable. He said a client forwarded the post, and they wanted reassurance. I said I have done nothing wrong, and he nodded, but his eyes avoided mine. He suggested I take a leave, just a short one, until the noise calms down. I heard what he meant. My father had made me a risk. When I walked out, my coworkers acted busy, like kindness could be contagious. The hardest part was church, because my father built half his power there. On Sunday, Ryan Nolan and I walked in with our children, and the sanctuary felt colder than usual. People smiled at my father and stepped away from me, like the aisle was a border. Franklin Mercer stood near the front, greeting everyone, calm and polished, as if he did not light a fire online. Elaine Mercer sat beside him, hands folded, eyes fixed forward. She did not look at me. After service, Pastor Daniel Cross approached slowly, and his voice sounded careful. He said he was sorry for the situation, and he hoped we could keep peace. I asked him what peace means when a child is being punished. He did not answer directly. He said he would speak with Franklin. Then he walked away, because confrontation is expensive in a small town. That afternoon, my brother Owen Mercer called. He did not ask how my children were doing. He told me to stop embarrassing our father and to delete any accusations. I told him I never accused anyone publicly, and he said silence does not matter now. He said Franklin wants a public apology, and then maybe the family will reconsider. I asked Owen why Franklin did it, and Owen went quiet. Then he said I should have stayed in my lane. When the call ended, Ryan sat with me at the kitchen table, and he said, "Your father is steering the narrative." He said, "We will not chase his story. We will bring our own facts." The reason Franklin Mercer chose exile is because I touched the one thing he cannot defend, the books. 2 months before the post, Elaine Mercer asked me to help her organize receipts for the Mercer charity. She framed it like spring cleaning, but her hands shook while she spoke. I said yes, because I am a certified public accountant, and because I still believed my father could be honest. We sat at her dining table with folders and bank statements. At first it looked normal. Donations in, grants out, community events, scholarship checks. Then I saw a line item that did not match the charity mission, recurring consulting payments, month after month, to a firm I had never heard of. The amounts were not tiny, and the descriptions were vague. Strategy support, advisory services, community outreach planning. That is the kind of language people use when they want you to stop asking. I asked Elaine, who approved it. Elaine hesitated, then said Franklin handled those decisions. I asked for invoices. She did not have any. I pulled the public filing and compared it to the internal ledger, and I saw the same company name repeating. I felt my stomach drop, because patterns like that rarely end well. That night, I called Franklin and asked about the consulting fees. He did not ask what I found. He asked why I was digging. He told me the charity was his responsibility, not mine. I said the charity had a board, and donors deserve transparency. Franklin's voice turned icy, and he told me to remember my place. I said my place is on the side of the truth, and he laughed once, sharp and humorless. He said I was being dramatic, and he warned me to stop or I would regret it. The next day I requested a meeting with the charity treasurer, and Franklin intercepted it. He told the staff I was not authorized. He told Elaine to stop working with me. Then Owen Mercer showed up at my house, unannounced, and he said Franklin was disappointed in me. Owen said I was trying to destroy our father, and I told him I was trying to protect the charity. Owen said the town will never choose me over Franklin, and I realized he was right about one thing. My father did not post to express pain. He posted to control witnesses before the numbers could speak. Ryan Nolan kept his promise. He did not argue online. He hunted paper. He pulled every public record he could access: charity filings, corporate registrations, dissolution notices, and property links. He found that the consulting company Franklin used had been dissolved years earlier, yet it still received payments. He found mailing addresses that led to empty suites and phone numbers that rerouted to generic voicemail. He built a timeline on our kitchen table, and when he added the totals, the amount was $185,400. Seeing it in ink made my skin burn. It was not a rumor, it was a trail. Ryan said Franklin posted to discredit you first, because once people doubt you, they doubt your evidence. That night, after our children fell asleep, someone knocked softly at our back door. It was Elaine Mercer. She stood in the dark, coat pulled tight, eyes wet, looking over her shoulder like she expected Franklin Carr to appear. She did not step inside at first. She just held out a small flash drive. She said she could not talk long. She said Franklin tracks her phone, and he checks the mail, and he watches who she speaks to at church. She said she has been keeping her own notes for years, because she never felt safe asking questions. Elaine said she started logging withdrawals, transfers, and approvals, and she saved copies when she could. She said Franklin told her it was normal, and she tried to believe him, until he turned on me. She whispered that the post was not about shame, it was about fear. I asked her if she was safe, and she shook her head slightly. She said she will be, if the truth comes out fast. Elaine left before I could hug her, because she is trained to run from conflict. Ryan plugged in the drive, opened the first file, and the room went silent again. This time, the silence was different. It was not exile. It was evidence. Ryan Nolan and I stayed up past midnight, reading the files from the flash drive, line by line, date by date. Elaine Mercer notes were not emotional, they were careful, like she wrote them while holding her breath. Each entry matched a transfer, and each transfer matched the same pattern: vague descriptions, familiar vendors, and approval initials that always traced back to Franklin Mercer. I felt sick, not because I was surprised, but because I finally saw the full map. Ryan opened a spreadsheet and rebuilt the trail so it could not be dismissed as gossip. We printed a clean packet with timelines, totals, and supporting records. The number stayed the same: $185,400, and it sat on the page like a bruise. I asked Ryan what we should do first, and he said we do not argue with the town. He said we speak to the people who have power to act, and we do it quietly. He listed 3 names: the charity board chair, the bank compliance office, and the church leadership. He said Franklin built his image on those pillars, and evidence will crack them faster than emotion. The next morning, I called Monica Stafford, the chair of the Mercer Charity Board. She answered with a voice that sounded cautious, like she feared being recorded. I asked for a private meeting, and I said it was about financial irregularities, not personal conflict. Monica paused, then agreed to meet after the upcoming charity gala, when board members would already be present. That same day, Ryan contacted Kevin Park at the bank compliance department through a public reporting channel. He did not accuse, he requested review, and he attached documents that pointed to possible misuse of funds. Then, I emailed Pastor Daniel Cross and asked for 10 minutes after service, not to talk about feelings, but about harm done to my children and deception done to the congregation. Pastor Daniel replied with one sentence: "I will speak with you." Owen Mercer heard about my calls within hours because my father monitors the town like a dashboard. Owen came to my house again, face tight, and he told me I was making a huge mistake. He said Franklin would destroy me for this. I told Owen Franklin already tried, and now I had proof. Owen warned me that people will always choose Franklin. I looked at him and said, then they can choose him with open eyes. After Owen left, I checked on my kids, and I promised myself I would not trade their safety for a quiet lie. The gala arrived like a stage Franklin Mercer built for himself. The venue was dressed in white linens and warm lights, and the banner carried the Mercer charity name in gold. People greeted Franklin like he was a hero, because small towns worship familiar faces. He stood near the entrance, shaking hands, smiling wide, playing the role he has rehearsed for years. Elaine Mercer moved beside him like a shadow, eyes lowered, shoulders tight. When she saw me, her face flickered. Then she looked away, because fear still directs her body. Ryan Nolan and I walked in with calm posture. Not because we felt calm, but because calm keeps you credible. My children stayed home with a sitter, because they deserved peace. Franklin noticed me and smiled. The same smile from his Facebook post, polite and poisonous. He leaned toward a donor and said something low, and I watched heads turn toward me in slow waves. Ryan squeezed my hand once, and he whispered that we are not here to defend our reputation. We are here to deliver facts. We carried 3 identical packets in plain folders. No dramatic labels, just organized evidence. Ryan reminded me of the order: Monica Stafford first, Kevin Park second, and Pastor Daniel Cross third. We waited for moments when each person was not surrounded, because we wanted privacy, not spectacle. When Monica walked toward the silent auction table, I approached and asked if we could speak for 1 minute. Monica studied my face, then nodded. I handed her the folder and said the contents include records tied to the charity accounts, and I believe funds were misused. Monica did not open it yet, but her grip tightened. Next, Ryan found Kevin near the sponsor wall. Ryan introduced himself, gave the folder, and said this contains documentation already submitted, and we wanted you to have the clean packet in hand. Kevin nodded once, professional and unreadable. Finally, I found Pastor Daniel near the hallway outside the ballroom. I handed him the folder and said my father weaponized the church to exile my children while he hid financial wrongdoing. Pastor Daniel looked down at the folder, then back at me, and his face changed, like a man realizing the cost of silence. We did not raise our voices, and we did not confront Franklin in public. We returned to our table, sat down, and waited, because the next move belonged to the people with authority. It did not take long for the air in the ballroom to shift. Monica Stafford left her seat once, then returned with 2 board members, faces tight, whispering into each other's shoulders. Kevin Park stepped out to the hallway, took a call, then came back without a smile. Pastor Daniel Cross walked to the side door and spoke to an usher, then disappeared behind the curtain like he needed space to think. Franklin Mercer kept performing, laughing loudly, greeting donors, moving through the room like he owned it. But his eyes started scanning, quick and sharp, because he could feel the room slipping. Ryan Nolan and I stayed seated, hands folded, watching without reacting. We were not looking for revenge. We were looking for protection. After the keynote speech, Monica approached our table with a controlled expression. She asked if we could step into a small office, and her voice sounded firm. In that room, Monica opened the folder, read the first page, then flipped faster. One board member asked me if I could explain the consulting company. I told them it was dissolved, and the payments continued anyway. Monica asked if I had proof of totals. Ryan pointed to the summary page, $185,400, supported by the ledger and Elaine Mercer notes. The board members swallowed hard and said they would call an emergency session tonight. Monica then said Franklin would be suspended from any authority, pending review. I heard the word suspended, and my knees almost buckled, because power rarely meets consequence in a town like this. In the hallway, Pastor Daniel spoke with me quietly. He said he did not know, and I told him he chose not to know. He nodded, because the truth landed. Later, Kevin passed us near the exit and said the bank would begin a compliance investigation immediately, and accounts connected to suspicious activity could be frozen. Franklin did not yet know what was coming, but he sensed danger. He approached our table and demanded to know what we were doing. I looked at my father and said, "You posted to silence me, and you failed." Franklin's face tightened, and he told me I was lying. Monica stepped up behind him and said this is no longer a family matter. Franklin turned pale, because he recognized that tone, the tone of institutions that do not fear him. Ryan and I walked out into the night air, and for the first time since the Facebook post, my lungs expanded without pain. The next morning, the phone calls started, but the tone changed. People were not calling to gossip anymore. They were calling to verify. Monica Stafford texted that the board held an emergency vote, and Franklin Mercer was suspended from any involvement. Kevin Park emailed a short confirmation. The bank opened a compliance investigation, and any accounts tied to the charity could be restricted. I read the message twice, because my body still expected the town to protect my father. Franklin did not accept the shift quietly. He showed up at our house before lunch, furious and smiling at the same time. He said I ambushed him, and he said I was trying to destroy the Mercer name. I asked him one question: where did the money go? Franklin did not answer. He pointed at Ryan Nolan and called him a manipulator. Ryan stayed calm and said Franklin posted that disowning message to discredit me first. Franklin snapped that he did it to protect the family. I said you did not protect the family, you used the family. Elaine Mercer called me later from a blocked number. Her voice shook, and she said Franklin is raging at home, breaking things, demanding to know what she gave me. I told her I did not say her name to anyone, and she whispered, "Thank you," like it cost her. Owen Mercer sent me a message blaming me for everything. He said I would regret humiliating our father. I replied with one sentence: the numbers are not humiliation, they are facts. At church that evening, Pastor Daniel Cross stood at the front after service and asked for a private meeting with the charity board immediately. People noticed, because in a small town, urgency is loud. I watched faces change in real time, curiosity turning into concern. Franklin tried to keep his posture, but his eyes kept scanning for control. When Monica walked past him without smiling, I saw Franklin flinch. Ryan and I left quietly, because we were not chasing applause. At home, my children asked why the grown-ups looked strange at school pickup. I told them some adults made mistakes, and now they have to fix them. My older child asked if Grandpa was still mad. I said Grandpa is facing consequences, and consequences are not our job to carry. That night, Ryan printed one more copy of the evidence, and we filed it safely. Then we turned off our phones, and for the first time in weeks, we slept. By the weekend, the story had flipped, and Franklin Mercer could not flip it back. Monica Stafford called and said the board hired an outside auditor. She said the auditor requested immediate access to every record, and Franklin refused at first, then threatened lawsuits. Monica said, "Throughout work on auditors." Kevin Park sent another update. The bank flagged suspicious transfers, and the charity accounts were frozen pending review. That word frozen traveled fast, because donors hear it like an alarm. Pastor Daniel Cross requested a meeting with me and Ryan Nolan in his office. He looked exhausted, like he finally realized what silence costs. He said Franklin had been using church credibility to project moral authority. He said the elders would vote to remove Franklin from leadership until the investigation ended. I asked Pastor Daniel why he did not defend my children when the Facebook post hit. Pastor Daniel lowered his eyes and said he was afraid of division. I told him division already happened. It just landed on the weakest people first. Outside the church, people started approaching me with hesitant apologies. Some said they should have called. Some said they did not know what to believe. I listened, because anger is heavy, but I did not forget. Franklin tried a last public play. He posted again, claiming persecution, claiming jealous enemies, and claiming I was unstable. This time, the comments were not worship. People asked questions. People asked for receipts. Franklin deleted the post within an hour, because questions are harder than insults. My employer called and apologized for suggesting leave. They said they had heard new information, and they valued my work. I thanked them, and I still felt the sting, because safety should not depend on rumors. That night, Elaine Mercer came to my door again, eyes red, hands shaking. She said Franklin demanded she choose him over truth. She said she could not do it anymore. Ryan handed her tea, and she held the cup like it was a lifeline. Elaine whispered that Franklin took money because he believed he deserved it. She said he called it compensation. I looked at her and said it is theft, and she nodded, because naming it mattered. The consequences arrived in layers, not all at once, but each layer removed another costume. Franklin Mercer was placed on administrative leave at the bank. Then his access badge stopped working, just like mine did. The church elders announced he would step down from all leadership roles during the investigation. Monica Stafford told donors that the charity board was cooperating fully and that funds were protected. In a town like ours, those announcements were louder than sirens. Franklin tried to approach me at school pickup, smiling like he could still command the scene. Ryan Nolan stepped beside me, and Franklin stopped short when he saw other parents watching. Franklin said we should handle this privately. I told him he made it public when he disowned me online. Franklin hissed that I owed him loyalty. I told him loyalty is not silence in the face of wrongdoing. He walked away fast because he hates witnesses. Later that day, Kevin Park called Ryan. He said the bank forwarded materials to appropriate authorities, and he advised us to keep documentation secure. My stomach tightened, because hearing the process become official makes everything real. Elaine Mercer sat at my kitchen table that night and said she was leaving Franklin. She said she rented a small apartment, and she packed a bag while Franklin was at church meetings. She looked ashamed for needing to escape, and I told her survival is not shame. Owen Mercer sent a final message accusing Elaine of betrayal. Elaine read it, then turned her phone off. I watched her do it, and it felt like watching someone step out of a storm. Ryan asked me how I was holding up. I told him I felt tired, but I felt clear. Franklin tried to erase me with one post, and all he did was shine a light on his own numbers. I tucked my children into bed, kissed their foreheads, and promised myself something simple. No more living under a lie. No more begging for a place at a table that demands our silence. 2 days later, my phone rang from a formal number, and my stomach tightened before I answered. A woman introduced herself as part of the bank investigation team, and she asked if I could confirm my role with the charity records. Her tone was calm, but every word carried weight. She said Franklin Mercer had been removed from all access pending review, and that meant he could not move money, could not approve transfers, and could not touch accounts. She asked about the consulting company, the one that kept receiving payments. I explained that it had been dissolved, and that the paperwork on the flash drive showed recurring transfers anyway. She asked if I had ever benefited from those payments. I said no, and I said it clearly, because truth matters when power collapses. After the call, Ryan Nolan told me to write down everything we remembered. Dates, conversations, threats, because memory gets challenged when money is involved. I did it that night, sitting at the same kitchen table where Ryan built the spreadsheet. I wrote about the first time Franklin warned me to stay in my lane. I wrote about the Facebook post, the timing, and the way it targeted my children. I wrote about Owen Mercer parroting Franklin words, demanding a public apology. Then I wrote about Elaine Mercer arriving in the dark with the flash drive. When I finished, my hand ached, but my mind felt steadier. The next morning, a local news page posted a vague update about the charity cooperating with an audit. They did not name Franklin, but the town did not need a name. At school pickup, one parent finally walked up and said she was sorry for believing the post. I thanked her, and I kept my face calm. Inside, anger still lived, but I refused to let it drive. Elaine sat with my kids that evening, helping them with homework, and I watched her soften. My younger child asked if Grandpa was going to jail. Elaine flinched, and I said we do not know yet. I said adults have to answer for choices, and that is not a child job to solve. Ryan and I looked at each other, and we both understood. The story was now bigger than family. It was accountability. Owen Mercer could not handle the shift. He had built his identity around being the good son, the one who stayed loyal, the one who never questioned. When the town started questioning Franklin Mercer, Owen started attacking me harder. He called me selfish, and he said I was ruining mom life. He sent messages saying I should retract everything before Franklin's career was destroyed. I told Owen nothing I sent was false, and he replied that truth does not matter, reputation does. That sentence explained Owen completely. Pastor Daniel Cross asked Owen to meet with church elders, and Owen refused. He said the church should stand by family, not paperwork. The elders did not agree. Owen tried to use family pressure, calling relatives, rallying cousins, trying to turn it into a loyalty war. Some joined him, because they feared being next. Others went quiet, because the evidence was louder than his anger. Owen then tried to intimidate Elaine Mercer. He showed up at her new apartment, pounding on the door, shouting that she was betraying Dad. Elaine called me shaking, and Ryan Nolan drove over, because intimidation is still intimidation, even when it wears a family face. Owen left before police arrived, but his message landed. He wanted Elaine back under Franklin's shadow. That night, Elaine told me she had lived under that pressure for decades, always smoothing, always excusing, always shrinking. She said the Facebook post felt like Franklin finally turning the weapon outward, because he ran out of private ways to control. I listened, and I felt grief, because I had wanted a mother who protected me. Elaine apologized again, and this time I believed her more, because she was still here, still facing consequences. Ryan told Elaine she was brave for leaving. Elaine shook her head, and said brave would have been stopping it earlier. I told her leaving now still counts. In the morning, Owen sent one last message: "If you do not fix this, you are dead to me." I stared at it, then I blocked him. I did not lose a brother that day. I lost an echo of my father. The official steps became visible in public, and Franklin Mercer hated that. The bank announced he was on indefinite leave pending investigation. It was written in neutral language, but everyone understood. The church elders announced Franklin would no longer serve as an elder while the review continued. Pastor Daniel Cross read a short statement about integrity and stewardship. People nodded like they were hearing scripture, but I knew some were hearing relief. Monica Stafford updated donors, explaining that an outside auditor was reviewing every transaction, and a new interim director would oversee operations. When those words were said aloud, Franklin Mercer lost the last illusion that he could talk his way out. He tried to pull me into a private meeting again, sending a note through a mutual friend. He said we could handle this quietly, like it was a misunderstanding. Ryan Nolan told me to ignore it, because private meetings are where Franklin rewrites reality. Franklin then tried to charm donors directly, calling them, visiting them, telling stories about betrayal. Some listened at first, then asked for documentation. Franklin could not provide it. The more he spoke, the more he revealed panic. One afternoon, I saw him in the grocery store, alone, not surrounded by admirers. He looked smaller, and his eyes looked tired. He spotted me and moved closer, and he whispered that I did this to him. I looked at him and said, "No. You did this when you took the money, and you did it again when you used my children as a shield." Franklin's mouth tightened, and he said I was ungrateful because he raised me. I said, "You raised me, to be honest, and now you are punishing honesty." He walked away fast because he could not stand that mirror. That night, my kids laughed at a movie, and I realized they were slowly letting go of the fear. The town did not heal overnight, but the truth was moving now, and truth has momentum. The auditor report arrived like a storm with a signature. Monica Stafford called me first, voice tight, and she said the board had enough to move forward. She said the report confirmed what Ryan Nolan traced: repeated payments to a dissolved consulting company, and transfers that did not match the charity mission. Monica said the total misused funds were $185,400, and she sounded stunned even while reading it. Kevin Park confirmed the bank compliance findings aligned, and the bank would cooperate with authorities. Hearing it, stated by professionals, felt different than hearing it at my kitchen table. At home, Elaine Mercer sat with her hands wrapped around a mug, staring at nothing. She said Franklin always told her numbers can be explained. I told her numbers can be proven. Owen Mercer called again, and this time his voice sounded frantic. He asked what I did, like evidence was an accident. I told him the auditors did their job. Owen said, "Dad will never forgive you." I said I do not need forgiveness from someone who stole from the community. That night, rumors swirled about charges, about resignations, about the charity being shut down. Monica texted me that the board would not shut it down. She said they would rebuild it, because donors gave money to help people, not to fund a secret life. Pastor Daniel Cross told the congregation that accountability is part of faith, and he sounded steadier than before. The next day, Franklin Mercer posted again, saying the report was biased. This time, even his allies questioned him. People asked why he did not provide invoices. People asked why he did not step aside earlier. Franklin deleted comments, then turned them off. That action said more than any words. Ryan looked at me and said, "Your father can shut off comments, but he cannot shut off the paper trail." I nodded, because the paper trail had become a wall. Elaine asked me if Franklin could go to prison. I told her I did not know, but I knew the town would not pretend anymore. Elaine whispered that she is terrified. I told her fear is normal, but truth is still necessary. Then I reminded her of the children, because the children were the reason we moved fast. Franklin used my kids to deflect attention. Now the deflection was gone. The bank moved quickly once the report became official. Franklin Mercer was terminated. Not suspended, terminated. In Collinsville, that kind of news travels faster than weather. People who once treated him like a pillar started talking about him like a caution. Elaine Mercer heard it from a neighbor before she heard it from Franklin. Franklin did not come home right away. He drove around for hours because he could not face a house where he no longer controlled the story. When he finally walked in, his face looked carved out. He did not apologize. He blamed Monica Stafford. He blamed Kevin Park. He blamed me. He said I wanted him to fall. Elaine stood up, hands trembling, and she said, "You made yourself fall." Franklin stared at her like she spoke a foreign language. He told her to pack a bag and leave if she was going to betray him. Elaine lifted her chin and said she already did. She said she had an apartment and she was done being his cover. Franklin shouted, and the sound echoed down the hallway. My children were not there, thank God. But the anger still infected the air. Elaine left with one suitcase, and she did not look back. Franklin called me after she left, voice shaking with rage. He said I destroyed his family. I told him he destroyed it when he posted that disowning message to protect his theft. Franklin said he will sue me. I told him to try, because discovery is not his friend. He went silent, then hung up. That night, Elaine slept on my couch, exhausted and hollow. I covered her with a blanket, then sat at my kitchen table with Ryan. Ryan asked if I felt satisfaction. I told him I felt relief and grief, because a father should not become an enemy. Ryan said a father becomes an enemy when he chooses money over his child. I nodded, because it was true. The church elders did not wait for Franklin Mercer to spin a redemption story. They voted, and Franklin was removed from elder status permanently. Pastor Daniel Cross announced it with a voice that did not shake. He said the church could not preach integrity while ignoring real harm. Some members cried, because they loved the idea of Franklin, not the truth of him. Others looked relieved, because they had been afraid to question him. Franklin showed up anyway, the next Sunday, sitting in the back like he expected the room to bow. People did not bow. They stared, then looked away, because shame changes direction when power is gone. After service, Franklin approached Pastor Daniel and demanded a meeting. Pastor Daniel told him the meeting would include other elders, because transparency matters now. Franklin refused and stormed out. Outside, he saw me with Elaine Mercer and Ryan Nolan, and his face tightened. He hissed that Elaine belonged with him. Elaine looked at him and said, "I belong with the truth." Franklin flinched like he was hit. Then he turned to me and said, "You will regret this when the town forgets." I told him the town might forget the post, but it will not forget the audit. That night, a few church women brought casseroles to my house, awkward and apologetic. One said she was sorry she believed the Facebook post. Another said she thought Franklin was protecting the church. I thanked them, and I accepted the food, because my kids needed dinner. But I kept my boundaries clear, because trust does not return in one casserole. Ryan reminded me that accountability is not revenge, it is repair. I watched my children play in the living room, and I realized repair was finally possible, because Franklin no longer controlled the room. When Franklin Mercer lost his job and his church title, he tried a different mask. He showed up at my door on a rainy evening, without his usual posture, without a smile for the neighbors. He looked smaller, and he spoke softer, and for 1 second I almost believed it. He said he wanted to talk, as a father. I did not invite him in. I stood in the doorway with Ryan Nolan beside me, because I will not be cornered again. Franklin said he never meant to hurt my children. I asked him why he posted that message at 11 o'clock at night, and why he wrote it to isolate me. Franklin said he was angry, and he said I embarrassed him. He still framed it around himself. He said if I had not questioned the charity, none of this would have happened. Ryan asked him one question: where did the $185,400 go? Franklin's eyes flashed, and he said it went to expenses. Ryan said, "Show receipts." Franklin looked away, because receipts do not exist for a story. He then tried to bargain. He said if I publicly clarified that he was misunderstood, he would publicly take me back. I almost laughed. I told him I do not need your approval, and I do not need your rescue. Franklin's face tightened, and the softness cracked. He hissed that I was ungrateful, and he said I was destroying the Mercer name forever. I told him the Mercer name is not my responsibility, my children are. Franklin demanded to see them. I said no, because he used them as shields, and he used them as weapons. He stepped forward, and Ryan stepped between us. Franklin backed up, then pointed at Ryan, and called him the real problem. Ryan stayed calm and said, "No, Franklin. The real problem is that you would rather burn your daughter than face your own numbers." Franklin stared at us, then turned and walked into the rain. I closed the door, and my hands shook, not from fear, from the grief of realizing he still did not understand. Ryan held my shoulder and said, "You did not lose a father tonight. You lost an illusion." Once Franklin Mercer fell, the town tried to climb back toward me. People who ignored my calls suddenly wanted coffee. Parents who avoided me at pickup suddenly smiled. Some apologized sincerely. Others acted like nothing happened, which is its own kind of cruelty. I accepted only what felt real, because my children watched every choice I made. One afternoon, a teacher pulled me aside and said she was sorry my child heard rumors. She said she should have shut it down sooner. I thanked her, and I told her a simple rule: do not let adults punish children for adult drama. At the grocery store, a woman said she shared the Facebook post, and she felt ashamed now. I told her shame is not enough. Do better next time. Monica Stafford called with updates. The charity would repay misused funds through insurance and recovery, and new controls would be installed. She asked if I would join an advisory committee, because she wanted transparency. I said maybe later, because my life was still rebuilding. Kevin Park confirmed that banking restrictions remained, and further steps would be handled by authorities. Pastor Daniel Cross asked Elaine Mercer to speak privately with church elders, not to shame her, but to support her. Elaine cried when she told me, because she had never been supported without conditions. At home, my children started relaxing. They stopped asking if people hated us. They started inviting friends over again. Ryan and I kept our routines steady: dinner, homework, bedtime. Because stability is the opposite of public humiliation. Late one night, I scrolled back to Franklin's original post, now deleted, but still living in screenshots. I felt anger rise again. Then I felt something else: clarity. That post was meant to erase me. Instead, it revealed who he was. The town did not defend me because I was right. The town defended me only after evidence made it safe. That lesson will stay with me forever. Elaine Mercer kept moving forward, even when it hurt. She met with the charity board, answered questions, and handed over documents she had hidden for years. She met with church elders, and she admitted she stayed quiet too long. Nobody yelled at her, because people could see she had been trapped. Elaine started therapy, and she called it learning to breathe. She also started setting boundaries with Owen Mercer. Owen kept texting her guilt, saying she destroyed Dad. Elaine wrote back one sentence: "Dad destroyed trust, and I am done carrying his blame." Owen threatened to cut her off. Elaine said, "Do it." Watching her grow a spine made me emotional, in ways I did not expect. I wanted a mother who protected me as a child. I could not go back and fix that, but I could watch her protect my children now, and that mattered. Elaine offered to help with pickup and babysitting. She offered to cook, to fold laundry, to do ordinary things, because ordinary things rebuild a life after a public shaming. My children warmed to her slowly. They asked why Grandpa was mean, and Elaine told them Grandpa made bad choices, and adults sometimes hurt people instead of admitting they are wrong. She did not defend him. That honesty was new. Franklin Mercer tried to contact Elaine repeatedly. He left voicemails crying, then yelling, then crying again. Elaine saved them and did not respond. She told me she used to rush to fix his moods. Now, she let his moods sit with him. One evening, Elaine said she was sorry again, and I told her, "I hear you." I did not promise forgiveness on a schedule. I promised we would keep telling the truth. Ryan Nolan said truth is what finally made this town safe for our kids again. I nodded, and I felt exhausted, but I also felt proud. Franklin tried to disown his daughter to bury a problem. All he did was teach me, and teach my children, that dignity does not come from approval. It comes from refusing to lie. When the authorities officially became involved, the town mood changed again. It was no longer a family scandal. It was a community problem with paperwork. Kevin Park confirmed that documentation had been forwarded to the appropriate agencies, and the phrase appropriate agencies sounded clinical, but it landed heavy. Monica Stafford said investigators requested interviews with board members and staff. Pastor Daniel Cross warned church leaders not to discuss details publicly, because gossip can interfere with truth. Franklin Mercer tried to control the story anyway. He told people it was politics, jealousy, and betrayal. But that narrative could not compete with subpoenas. Elaine Mercer was asked to provide testimony about her role, and she shook for days beforehand. I told her she does not owe Franklin protection. She owes herself honesty. Ryan Nolan sat with her at the table and helped her organize dates, because even truth needs structure. When Elaine walked into that interview, she looked terrified, but she walked in. That matters. Owen Mercer then tried a new tactic. He reached out to me with a calmer tone. He asked if we could talk, and he said he missed his sister. I read the message and felt anger rise, because it sounded like he wanted comfort without accountability. I replied with one question. Do you admit Dad lied about me? Owen did not answer. He wrote that things were complicated. I told him no. They were simple. Dad posted to destroy me. And you helped. Owen went silent again. The day Franklin was questioned, he arrived at the building in a suit, posture tight, smile forced. A friend texted me a photo from across the street, because in this town, everyone still watches. Franklin tried to look untouchable, but you cannot posture your way past an investigation. That night, my kids asked why people kept whispering at school. I told them grown-ups were learning a lesson about truth. My older child asked if Grandpa will say sorry. I said I do not know. Then I added the part I wanted them to learn young. An apology without change is only noise. Ryan nodded, because he knows. We kept our life small and steady, because the investigation was loud enough without our help. Owen Mercer finally cracked when consequences touched him. He had relied on Franklin Mercer for job connections and social status. And when Franklin fell, Owen's position started wobbling. People stopped inviting him to the rooms that used to open automatically. He called Elaine Mercer, first, angry and scared, demanding that she fix it. Elaine told him she cannot fix what Dad broke. Owen then showed up at my house, standing on the porch like he was still entitled to entry. Ryan Nolan opened the door and stayed between us. Owen asked to talk to me alone. Ryan said no, and Owen looked offended, because he is used to being protected by family rules. I stepped outside anyway, because I wanted to end the loop. Owen said he did not know the money was real. I asked him why he defended Dad so hard then. Owen said Dad is our father. I asked Owen if a father should weaponize children to hide theft. Owen flinched, because the word theft is sharp when you have been calling it mistakes. Owen admitted Dad told him the charity was fine, and he said Dad promised it would all be handled. I asked Owen if Dad also told him to demand my public apology. Owen looked down, then said yes. He said Dad wanted the town to see me as unstable, so nobody would listen to my questions. Hearing Owen admit it felt like a door opening, not because it erased harm, but because it named it. I told Owen he hurt my kids, and that harm does not disappear because he is scared now. Owen asked if he could see the children. I said no, not yet. I told him he needs to repair with actions, not with requests. Owen started to cry, and it looked more like self-pity than remorse. Ryan said you can feel sorry, and you can still be responsible. Owen left without shouting this time. Elaine watched from the window, and later she whispered that she never thought she would see Owen question Franklin. I told her power collapses slowly, then suddenly, and we were watching the suddenly part. As weeks passed, Collinsville began rewriting its habits. People stopped using Franklin Mercer name like a shield. The charity board held a public meeting, transparent and uncomfortable, and Monica Stafford explained the new controls. Pastor Daniel Cross preached about confession and accountability, and for once, it sounded like he meant it. Parents at school stopped whispering when I walked by. Some still avoided my eyes, but fewer did. I did not need everyone to like me. I needed my children to feel safe in their own community. Elaine Mercer started volunteering quietly at the charity office, not as a leader, as a helper. She said she wanted to repay the community in real ways, not in speeches. Ryan Nolan kept working, kept cooking, kept being the steady center, because storms do not end, they fade. One afternoon, a local reporter requested an interview with me. I declined. I did not want my children growing up as a headline. I wanted them growing up as kids. Franklin tried one last attempt at control. He left a voicemail on my phone, voice trembling, saying we are family, and family should not do this to each other. I listened once, then deleted it. I was done letting him define family. Family is the people who protect children, not the people who sacrifice them to save an image. That night, my older child asked if we could go to church again without feeling weird. I said yes, and we went. People smiled, some awkward, some sincere, and I held my child's hand and walked in anyway. It was not about them accepting us. It was about us refusing to be exiled again. The town learned a lesson, and so did I. If someone tries to disown you to shut you up, it means you are close to the truth. The apologies kept coming, and each one taught me something. Some people apologized because they were truly ashamed, and some apologized because it was finally safe to stand near me again. I learned to tell the difference by listening to what they mentioned. The sincere ones mentioned my children and asked if they were okay. The performative ones mentioned Franklin Mercer and asked if I felt bad for him. I did not. Monica Stafford told me the charity board was pursuing recovery options, and they would work to restore what was taken. Kevin Park said the bank compliance file remained active, and that meant Franklin could not quietly slip back into influence. Pastor Daniel Cross asked me to speak at a small group meeting about boundaries and truth. I declined, because I did not want my life turned into a lesson plan. I wanted my life to be mine. One afternoon, a neighbor came over with cookies and tears. She said she shared the disowning post, and she never asked a single question. She said she was sorry. I thanked her. Then I told her the truth she needed to hear. Next time, ask who benefits from a public shaming. She nodded, and I believed her because she did not argue. Elaine Mercer started rebuilding her own reputation too. She showed up at school events, sat quietly, and supported the kids like a grandmother should. My older child accepted her first. My younger child took longer. I did not rush them, because trust is earned in small moments. Ryan Nolan reminded me that we cannot control what people say, but we can control what we tolerate. I held on to that. When someone tried to bring me gossip about Franklin, I ended the conversation. When someone asked me to forgive him for the sake of peace, I said peace cannot be built on denial. That night, I reread the first notes Elaine wrote in her log. The earliest entries were small, only a few lines, but they carried years of fear. I realized Franklin did not just steal money. He stole oxygen from his own household. Now the air was slowly returning. Franklin Mercer hated being invisible. He tried to re-enter the town by playing the victim. He showed up at community events with a sad smile, telling people he had been misunderstood. He tried to sit in familiar pews, and he tried to shake hands like nothing changed. This time, people did not rush to protect him. Some nodded politely, then stepped away. Others asked direct questions, and Franklin did not know how to answer without control. He sent Elaine Mercer a long message asking her to come home, and he promised he would change. Elaine did not respond. He sent me one too, short and sharp, saying we should meet privately to settle this as family. I did not answer. Ryan Nolan told me that control-seeking people use private meetings to rewrite public records. I believed him. Owen Mercer then called, voice softer, saying Dad was struggling. I asked Owen if Dad admitted what he did. Owen hesitated, then said Dad thinks people overreacted. I told Owen that means Dad is not sorry. 2 days later, Franklin showed up at my workplace, sitting in the lobby like he belonged there. He asked the receptionist to calm me down. When I came out, he stood and said he wanted to speak calmly. I asked him if he was ready to tell the truth publicly. Franklin said no. He said public talk is unnecessary. He wanted quiet, because quiet is where he controls the frame. I told him he lost the right to quiet when he posted that message about me. Franklin's eyes narrowed, and he said I was still his daughter. I said being a father is actions, not genetics. Franklin then said he wanted to see my children. I said no, and I said it once. Franklin stepped closer and lowered his voice, and he threatened to tell more stories if I kept resisting. Ryan stepped beside me, and I told Franklin the next story he tells will be added to the file. Franklin froze, because files are what finally scare him. He walked out without shouting, and I watched his shoulders sag, like he was carrying his own consequences for the first time. The final part of this story is quieter than the beginning, but it is more powerful. Franklin Mercer tried to erase me with a midnight post. He tried to turn the town into his weapon, and he aimed it at my children. He did it because he believed reputation could outrun records. He was wrong. Paper does not get tired. Evidence does not care about charm. The charity rebuilt itself with new leadership, tighter controls, and a cleaner conscience. The church learned that silence protects the wrong person. Elaine Mercer learned that leaving is sometimes the first honest act of a lifetime. Owen Mercer learned that loyalty without truth is just fear wearing a family name. Ryan Nolan and I learned that the best revenge is not screaming. It is placing facts in the right hands. My children learned something too, and that was my real goal. They learned that love does not humiliate. They learned that adults can be wrong, even when adults are powerful. They learned that boundaries are not cruelty, they are safety. If you ever get publicly shamed by someone who wants to silence you, remember this. The louder the shaming, the more likely they are covering something. Do not chase the rumor, chase the record. Do not beg for a seat at a table that requires your silence. Build a new table and fill it with people who protect the smallest voices. That is what we did. And that is how we kept our dignity and our family when a powerful man tried to disown us to save himself.